Virologist predicts imminent tsunami of death among the COVID vaccinated. An imprisoned rap mogul sends a chilling warning to Diddy over a little secret room. And Louisiana becomes the first state to officially reject the globalist agenda. Those stories and more tonight. I'm Maria Z of zmedia.com, and this is Vigilant Fox's Media Blackout, telling us another pandemic is coming. Something that went from being a 1 in a 100 year event has now become something that Bill Gates can predict, I don't know, annually. But what if they know something we don't? Those who were warning of the dangers of the COVID injections from the beginning were warning that there would be dire consequences for those who received the COVID shots. We've seen some of those dire consequences, sadly, in the form of aggressive cancers, heart problems, sudden death. The list goes on. But what of the immune systems of the vaccinated that have been obliterated? World-renowned Belgian virologist Geert van den Bosch issued a grave warning of an imminent massive tsunami of COVID illnesses and deaths among the vaccinated that will collapse hospitals and cause financial, economic, and social chaos. On the Kunstlercast podcast on Friday, Bosch said, "What I am predicting is a massive, massive tsunami of illness and death among highly vaccinated populations with compromised immune systems. You will see what will happen, for example, in the next coming weeks, is more and more cases of more serious long COVID. They will start to replace the surge of the cancers. Now we have a more chronic phase. It will end with a hyper-acute phase, a huge, huge wave. I've been studying this now for 4 years. I know what I'm talking about. I'm probably the only person, in all modesty, who understands the immunology behind this," Bosch said. This is an important quote. He says, "The thing I want your audience to understand, what we will be facing in the hyper-acute COVID crisis that is imminent, is that we will have to build a completely new world. It is very, very clear that when this starts, our hospitals will collapse. And that means the chaos in all kinds of layers of society, financial, economic, social, you name it, will be complete." Well, the final nail in the coffin of the social structure, economic structure, and health industry certainly does sound like one of the goals they want to achieve. Here to discuss this further is Dr. Geert van den Bosch himself. He joins us now. Dr. Geert van den Bosch, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Maria, for having me again. Thanks.
Oh, absolutely. You've been right about so much from the start. And so this is why we wanted to talk to you about this latest alarming statement that you've made. You've said, "What I'm predicting is a massive, massive tsunami of illness and death among highly vaccinated populations with dysregulated immune systems." Dr. van den Bosch, can you please break this down for us and explain why you think this is going to happen soon?
Well, yeah, Maria, I will do my very best to summarize this, but of course there is a lot of immunology involved in this. And as you know, the immune system has been evolving as well as the virus has been evolving. And in fact, what is important to understand is that the detrimental course of this pandemic has in fact, after the mass vaccination, has been caused by Omicron, by the vaccine breakthrough infections. So when the virus breaks through the immune defense, you have to compare this like with an enemy that breaks through the immune defense of a country, right? It's going to overwhelm that country. And so that is what we have seen, that Omicron is causing vaccine breakthrough infections. And what you have, same with the military, when the key forces, can no longer resist, when the crucial fire lines are defeated, then you call up the reservists, right? Those guys, of course, are not as well trained, and their defense is suboptimal. That is exactly what we have seen with the immune system after, the neutralizing, after the virus started developing resistance to the key forces and the neutralizing antibodies, etc. We know all this. we found out that Omicron, that caused the vaccine breakthrough infections, was all of a sudden largely resistant to the neutralizing antibodies. And then we have seen that a new kind of immune response was developing. These were the what I call the reservists that are called up. We call this in immunology immune refocus to another type of immune response, which however is suboptimal. And that's my point. These suboptimal immune responses have ultimately led to immune escape, because it's easier for the enemy, of course, to overcome an immune defense if the immune defense is weak, if the immune defense is suboptimal. But not only that, these suboptimal immune responses have also led to immune pathology. So very easy. People should bear in mind that the immune defense against a virus like SARS-CoV-2 should do two things. Either it should simply kick out the virus by neutralizing it, or when the virus has already infected the cells, it should kick out the infected cells. Now, the first is taken care of by neutralizing antibodies, and the second is taken care of what we call cytolytic T cells that have the capacity to kill. Now, when you overcome those forces and you call up the reservists with suboptimal immune defenses, well, your antibodies are going to be suboptimal. These suboptimal antibodies have differentiated into, well, for the experts, right, the IG4 antibodies that have caused immune pathology. And then after that, we have seen when also the cytotoxic T cell defense has been overcome by the virus, that we have seen that people developed suboptimal T cell responses that are now, Maria, the cause of long COVID, of immune pathology. So what we are seeing is that the virus has evolved, or the pandemic, from an acute phase, as the WHO is saying, we are over the acute phase of the pandemic. But they didn't tell you that the pandemic is now evolving to a chronic phase. And this chronic phase, the suboptimal immune forces that are now playing, are not only, because those things go hand in hand, promoting immune escape, but also in tandem, promoting immune pathology. And that is exactly what we are seeing. And of course, the virus is continuing to evolve, and will ultimately, there is no doubt, immunologically speaking, there is no doubt about this, will overcome this very last resistance by these suboptimal forces. When that happens, of course, when the last hurdle of resistance is gone, is breached, then of course there is no immune resistance whatsoever left in the vaccinated population. There is immune defense left, of course, in the unvaccinated population, because those guys have, during this whole trajectory, have been able to train their cell-mediated innate immunity. That has not happened with the vaccines. I've explained this multiple times in several different interviews and in several different articles.
Well, I want to ask you, Dr. Van der Bosch, in terms of, long COVID, the rising cancers, and people just becoming sick with all sorts of illnesses. Now, a lot of people attribute that to the dangers of the injections. They are causing multiple different illnesses and excess deaths around the world. Are you saying, though, that this is basically because their immune systems are, for the layman, destroyed? They're not able to fight off diseases and illnesses that they would normally be able to fight off?
Yeah. Well, Maria, again, it's a very difficult topic. I will try to be very concise. There is a misunderstanding. People are often talking about exhaustion, etc. The right word to use here is immune dysregulation. Because remember, we still have continuously reinfections, re-exposure by a virus that is now incredibly infectious, much more infectious than the original Omicron variants that were already way more infectious than the previous variants. So their immune system is still, to some extent, able to contain the virus, right? And remember, they are still, to some extent, protected against severe disease. So what is happening is really dysregulation. And is it the virus or the vaccine? To your question, no, the reason for this are the vaccine breakthrough infections, hence the virus, but only in vaccinated people. So it is, in fact, the vaccination that has led to the generation of Omicron. Omicron has led to the vaccine breakthrough infections. These vaccine breakthrough infections, as I just explained, have led to suboptimal immunity that on one hand side has led to an imperfect control of the viral replication and has secondarily led, and is still leading, to immune pathology, including cancer. So it is this complex interplay of repetitive virus breakthrough infections in highly vaccinated people that is responsible for both immune escape and immune pathology that go hand in hand. It's just that at this time, the immune pathology is more obvious than the disease because, frankly speaking, acute cases of COVID-19 disease, acute hospitalizations, acute rates of acute death have tremendously dropped, right? And this is what is so insidious that, in fact, at this stage, the virus is evolving in a very silent way. The clinical symptoms are still to some extent under control, but what you see right now is still a virus that is strongly evolving, and many of the vaccinees, because the disease is relatively under control, are now shedding the virus in an asymptomatic way, which is just promoting further spread.
Well,
and you can imagine,
what we know
as
is
with
that,
an army,
well,
there is a limit to all this. There is a limit to the immune defense.
Sure.
Even if you call the reservists, there is a limit, right? And that limit will soon be reached. There is no doubt about this. I have made a mistake in my timeline at the beginning. I apologize for this, but what was the reason? I have not taken into account that reservists would be called in, and the reservists is nothing else than the immune refocusing, the fact that the immune system could catch up to some extent, but insufficient to control the virus. In the meantime, virus infections have been prolonged, which has enabled the unvaccinated population to train better and better to become almost like completely resistant to the virus. And that is what is ultimately going to generate the herd immunity that we need to completely stop end this pandemic.
This is what you said to me a very long time ago. You said the unvaccinated are the ones who are going to help us generate herd immunity. And certainly we see the health in general of the unvaccinated being vastly superior to those that have had the injections.
Absolutely.
What I want to note is that we've had warnings that another pandemic is coming and disease X, and the WHO is preparing with their amendments to the international health regulations and also the CA plus or pandemic treaty, or all the different names that they give it, to basically resume world power through a medical dictatorship of sorts, based on the fact that another pandemic is coming. So they clearly know they're preparing for something. I can see how what you're describing could be, that type of situation could be used to declare another emergency.
Yeah, interestingly enough, Maria, this new virus that will ultimately be the dictator, it will be the only one that is still able to overcome all these hurdles, immune hurdles. That virus will look very, very differently. It will no longer be a SARS-CoV-2 virus. It will still be a coronavirus, but of a completely different type because of several different mutations, not only in spike protein, but also in other viral proteins. It will have a different glycosylation profile. For people who don't understand the term glycosylation, this is the sugar coat on the virus that nobody's talking about, will also completely change. So this virus will indeed be looking very, very differently from SARS-CoV-2, which could be a reason for health authorities to say, see, we have warned you, a new virus would pop up. No, it is the direct consequence of the continuous vaccine breakthrough infections that are responsible for the derailment of the immune system. And the vaccine breakthrough infections have originated from Omicron, which was a scourge, not a blessing, because Omicron directly resulted from the mass vaccination campaigns during a pandemic, not being able to control the virus while exerting immune pressure on the virus.
Dr. Van den Bosch, you've made the statements where we've got a couple of minutes left here today. You've made the statements that antivirals will be crucial for people. Obviously, ivermectin has performed incredibly well. Is this still your position?
The opposition.
Your position.
I'm strongly, of course, recommending people to take those antivirals, because when we will see this virus popping up, which I expect, I said, and I maintain these timelines, and I promise everybody I will no longer change those timelines. I said 50% chances that it happens before the end of April, 99% chances that it happens before the end of June. But what will be the features of those viruses is that it will cause enhanced severe disease, not only severe, enhanced severe disease. So using those antivirals at the time where symptoms start will be too late. People will need to take them prophylactically. And this is not a joke. I said, and I predicted, that these health authorities, the same that in fact were censoring the use of ivermectin, will see themselves forced to issue mandates for ivermectin and antivirals, because it will be the only way to a large extent to reduce the losses, because what you have to do is to prevent the vaccine breakthrough infections. So you have to prevent infections. If their immune system can no longer do this, of the vaccinees, you have to intervene, almost not with mass vaccination, for God's sake, but with mass antiviral prophylactic treatment.
Well, let me just say I won't be mandated into any medication, but I can appreciate your point.
No, but it's a kind of joke, but you understand what I'm saying.
I do. Dr. Van den Bosch, we appreciate your time today. Thank you. Can you please let people know where they can follow your work and find more information about all of your research?
Well, people should really read my latest articles on Voice for Science and Solidarity, which is my website, Voice for Science and Solidarity. It makes all sense, I think, and my articles are becoming shorter, but they are very much to the point, and I'm myself in state of highest alert right now, because I'm afraid of the chaos that this will cause on the healthcare system.
Well, we appreciate your time and your insight, Dr. Van den Bosch. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Maria.
We'd certainly like to thank Dr. Van den Bosch for joining us and giving his perspective on the current situation. Some have weighed in saying there's no evidence to back up these claims as yet, but one thing is certain. Dr. Van den Bosch's timeline coincides with the dates the World Health Organization wants to have their international health regulations amendments embedded into international law, legally binding on every single country to follow their mandates in a future health emergency. A future health emergency would no doubt be helpful to their argument and power grab. We know from last time that they can't be trusted, and Dr. Van den Bosch agrees. There are many theories regarding the effects of these so-called vaccines and COVID, with many experts stating that it may be long COVID that people are suffering from. Some say there's no such thing as long COVID, that COVID is dangerous, that it's no more than a sniffle, that viruses exist, that viruses don't exist, that millions more will die from the injections, that the deaths from the injections are slowing down, and the debate goes on. The key point here is that scientific debate must continue to be had with no censorship of these issues. The science is never settled. We'll be keeping a close eye on his predictions and whether the authorities decide to capitalize on such a situation if it does manifest. Now, it's no longer a question of if something is coming, it's when. The only shock? The what. While you still have some control, what are you going to do about it? The first step is going to our website, preparewithvnn.com. Your next step is stocking up on multiple one-week emergency food kits from My Patriot Supply. Priced at under $50, now's the time to buy in bulk. My Patriot Supply is equipped to help you prepare. They've helped over 2 million families already. These one-week kits with ready-hour foods provide over 2,000 calories every day. And they're sealed inside a rugged ammo can so they can last up to 25 years in storage. Just grab it and go in emergencies. Get these kits for under $50 this week only at preparewithvnn.com. That's preparewithvnn.com. Well, Trump haters have certainly been hit by a surprising turn of events. The author says, I keep telling the doomers nothing is going according to the script the elites wrote. How like a god must these people feel? These so-called elites, I mean. They make plans for billions of people and have the fantastic wealth to make those plans happen. They get together at big, super important conferences and openly discuss their plans for the rest of us. How to control what we eat. To encourage us to stop eating meat and real food and to eat the bugs instead. What medicines we can take and what treatments will be denied us. How many children we have or don't have. Where we live and how we can travel. How to set up mass migrations and manage them successfully while denying they're doing this. What we can say and more importantly, we're not allowed to say in public. Part of the Great Awakening we're currently undergoing in these strange times involves beginning to see the vast and sometimes complicated social engineering projects being enacted worldwide by various nefarious billionaires with far too much money and time on their hands. But despite all of their careful planning, despite the billions they've spent, despite the national governments, intelligence agencies, and news media they control around the globe, they've failed. They've failed to stop him, despite all the advantages they supposedly have, all the key cards they're holding. He's still coming, and boy, is he pissed. And it's becoming so obvious that even black-pilling doomers are being forced to sit up and take notice. The author says, I'll have to keep saying this because it's true, Trump was supposed to have been utterly and completely destroyed by now. According to all the carefully planned strategies worked out by billionaire elites and their minions at the big corporations and in our Congress and federal government, Donald J. Trump was to have been removed from the game board by now. He also points out that a big reason they've failed to stop Trump so far is that they've lost the iron-fisted full narrative control they once enjoyed. It's harder for the intelligence agency-controlled fake news to help Big Brother launch new fake narratives when ordinary citizens on X are being allowed to challenge it loudly and often successfully. The lawfare strategy is abysmally failing, as the deep state can't stop the social media or alternative news criticism of the injustice and blatant unfairness of the lawfare proceedings. He says at least Trump haters could take comfort in the fact that he was being successfully bankrupted by a series of ludicrously insane civil court judgments against him in New York State, right? Oh wait, never mind about that. It turns out that not only is Trump not going bankrupt, but he just managed to add billions to his net worth by some arcane act of mysterious and sorcerous warlockery, thanks to the exceedingly strange decision of the Biden SEC to allow the Truth Social DWAC merger to go through. Got that? Even as they try to financially ruin the man, somehow it all goes horribly wrong for them, and he ends up adding several billion more dollars to his fortune. Then there's Trump's ongoing takeover of the GOP party, which continued apace with the recent dethroning of the runner for Michael Whatley and Laura Trump. The runner ran straight from the RNC chair to what was supposed to be a cushy new job at NBC News, only to get unceremoniously dumped after less than a week. He says, seriously, who wrote this script for 2024? And he ends with, for some time now, Trump has been openly saying that when he begins to do what has to be done, most Americans will fully support him. No one will be able to seriously argue that the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, the State Department, and the Pentagon do not need deep and serious reforms. Trump being returned to the presidency by the voters will be a mandate, not some kind of weak, half-assed farewell tour. He won't need to run for re-election again, and so he can do what everybody knows needs to be done. End entire federal agencies, meld others into each other, and vastly reduce the size and power of the federal branch. He ends it with, I'm looking forward to it already. How about you? Following on from our coverage of this ongoing story last week, quote, your life is in danger, end quote. Suge Knight warns Diddy over that secret little room. Imprisoned rap mogul Suge Knight opened up in recent happenings involving hip-hop rival Sean Diddy Combs, whose houses in Miami and Los Angeles were raided last Monday by Homeland Security in connection with a federal investigation into sex trafficking, sexual assault, and the solicitation and distribution of illegal narcotics and firearms. We believe that there is a disturbing history of sex trafficking, a DHS officer told the New York Post on Thursday, following the raid which resulted in the seizure of hard drives, phones, and other evidence. We are responding to concrete, detailed, explicit allegations. This is not random. We didn't choose his name out of a hat. We had allegations that we're following up on, the officer continued. Well, Knight speaks. In response to the raid, Death Row Records co-founder Marion Hugh Knight Jr., aka Suge Knight, said during a Friday episode of his Collect Call Prison podcast that Combs needs to watch his back since he has secrets involving a, quote, secret room. It's a bad day for hip-hop, for the culture, black people, because if one looks bad, we all look bad. That's definitely nothing to cheer about, said Knight. But I'll tell you what, Puffy, your life is in danger. Your life is in danger because you know the secrets, who's involved in that little secret room you guys are participating in. They're going to get you if they can. While Diddy hasn't been charged with a crime and has vehemently denied breaking the law, Knight, who's serving a 28-year prison sentence for a 2015 hit-and-run incident, recommended that the rap impresario surrender to authorities. Debt. You go to bed thinking about it, you wake up thinking about it. Here's the truth. The system traps you in debt. High-interest credit cards and loans make it nearly impossible to pay off your debt, and insane inflation keeps you stuck paycheck to paycheck. Done with Debt is your lifeline. Done with Debt has an ingenious new strategy to help erase your debt faster and easier than you thought possible. Done with Debt analyzes all the debt options you qualify for. They know how to reduce bills. They know how to cut interest rates. Their skilled staff of negotiators know how to get debt out of your life permanently without bankruptcy and without a loan. Done with Debt are the experts in brilliant strategies for eliminating debt. But you need to hurry because some debt solutions are time sensitive. Here's how easy they make it. Go to donewithdebt.com. That's donewithdebt.com. Select VNN, Vigilant News Network, at checkout. That's donewithdebt.com. Well, RFK Jr. has hit back at Chris Cuomo after being labeled a conspiracy theorist. Independent presidential hopeful Robert Kennedy Jr. flipped the script on News Nation's Chris Cuomo Wednesday after the former CNN anchor painted him as a conspiracy theorist live on air. Quote, a lot of the write-ups are playing to your biggest weakness, which is that you spout a lot of conspiracy. Think whether it's deep state, whether it's 9/11, whether it's vaccines, you are painted with that brush. And I know you and the campaign think that this is water under the bridge. We've already addressed it. But I think that you should greatly rethink going there because all those write-ups today called you a conspiracist. And I think that there are a lot of people in this country who want another choice, but they're not going to vote for a conspiracist, Cuomo said. Tell me a theory that you think I got wrong, Kennedy responded. Show me facts. I don't say things unless I have a factual basis. Kennedy then listed a series of so-called conspiracy theories that ended up being true. Let's listen to some of this interaction.
And I think that there are a lot of people in this country that want another choice, but they're not going to vote for a conspiracist.
I was called a conspiracy theorist because I said that glyphosate, which is the active ingredient of Roundup, caused non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. People said that's a conspiracy theory. As it turned out, we won 3 jury trials in which they agreed with us, and Monsanto settled for $13 billion. I said at the beginning of the pandemic that vaccines were not going to prevent transmission. I said that because I was reading the science. I was reading the monkey studies that showed that they didn't prevent transmission in monkeys. So I knew they weren't going to do it in humans. I was called a conspiracy theorist, and now everybody admits that. I said that COVID lockdowns were going to be very, very harmful to children particularly. They would damage our economy, and they would not prevent the spread of a respiratory virus. And the reason I said that, I was reading the science. I was reading pandemic protocols over the past 40 years. I was called a conspiracy theorist. I said the masks were not going to work to prevent the spread of the disease, and that they would probably do more harm than good. And now everybody agrees with that. I said the same thing about social distancing, that it wasn't science-based. And Tony Fauci has now acknowledged that's true. Tell me a theory that you think I got wrong. To show me facts. I'm not somebody, I don't say things unless I have a factual basis. But what the defense of the political establishment is that anybody who questions reigning political orthodoxies is discredited and marginalized and demonized by characterizing them as a conspiracy theorist. But I don't know any place where I have advocated a theory that is not factual based. Tell me what it is. I'm happy to answer it.
I don't know what happened on 9/11, but I do understand the government's reckoning of it, and I don't have any reason to not believe it. Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying that you don't know whether you believe what the government says happened on 9/11? This matters.
Well, I don't, listen, I've been around long enough that I question everything that the government tells me. And I think people who don't question what the government tells them are not paying attention.
Maybe Chris Cuomo needs to learn a thing or two about the CIA's Project Mockingbird, which many believe is still in operation today, with many mainstream journalists seemingly still being a part of it, given that investigative journalism is basically dead and the MSM is simply just a mouthpiece for governments worldwide and all of their elusive and seemingly rogue 3-letter agencies. This is the same CIA that also created the term conspiracy theorist in order to discredit anyone who makes sense and questions the government. The conspiracy theorists have certainly had it right more times than the health experts at the CDC, that's for sure. It's why we're all still at optimal health. Independent media and freedom of speech has never been more paramount. Is he blackmailed? MTG questions Speaker Johnson's complete departure over abortion, illegals, and DOJ funding. Marjorie Taylor Greene suggested that House Speaker Mike Johnson is being blackmailed because of his complete departure from Republican concerns, saying the Louisiana Republican has completely changed his character. Mike Johnson has completely changed his character in a matter of about 5 months after he has become Speaker of the House, Greene told Tucker Carlson in a recent episode of Tucker Carlson Uncensored. Carlson pointed to Johnson's meeting with Ukraine's President Zelensky, after which Johnson said that the second congressional recess ends. His number one priority at a moment when the US is being invaded is to send that $60 billion to Ukraine, possibly as a loan. According to Carlson, Johnson won't come on his show to explain, while Zelensky also refuses to discuss his position. Tucker says that they're not grateful now, so we sent a message to the Speaker of the House and asked him to come on and explain why, when the majority of the Republicans he represents, both the voters and members of Congress, opposes why he would join with Democrats to do the one thing that Americans don't think we should do, which is send another $60 billion to pay the pensions of Ukrainian bureaucrats and fund a doomed war. Why are you for that? And of course, he hasn't responded. We also sent multiple requests to Zelensky himself for an interview to explain his position. Of course, he ignored that as well. Greene echoed Tucker's concerns, saying it's outrageous, and you can see her comments there on the article. And she said this needs to end, but Johnson has made a complete departure of who he is and what he stands for, and to the point where people are literally asking, is he blackmailed? When Carlson asked her to expound, Greene said that she has no idea if that's the case, but asks, what radically changes a man? I mean, if we break down the second part of basically an omnibus, let's break that down. Greene cited Johnson's funding of full-term abortion clinics, despite being pro-life, doing nothing for the southern border, particularly on the heels of Lake and Riley's murder at the hands of an illegal, which followed a video that was running on loop on social media where illegal aliens had rushed our border, ran over Texas National Guard. She said he did nothing to secure the border. It's the number one issue in the world. He completely changed who he was. Funded the FBI, gave them a brand new building, fully funded the Department of Justice that is persecuting everyone on the right and actually targeting our presidential candidate for election this year. Literally trying to put him in jail the rest of his life. We don't know who Mike Johnson is anymore. So I can't comprehend it, Greene continued. Let's take a listen.
Mike Johnson has completely changed his character in a matter of about 5 months after he has become Speaker of the House. Mike Johnson is a Christian. He called himself a conservative, always has been. He's a Republican member, but yet here we are after the minibus was passed just almost 2 weeks ago in Washington. And now with the $60 billion going to a war in Ukraine that 70% of Americans do not support it. That's the most recent polling. 70% of Americans and the majority of Republicans do not support funding Ukraine. People want to see a peace deal in Ukraine, not murdering more Ukrainians and more Russians. This needs to end. But no, Mike Johnson has made a complete departure of who he is and what he stands for. And to the point where people are literally asking, is he blackmailed? What is wrong with him? Because he's completely disconnected with what we want.
Do you think he is being blackmailed?
I have no idea. I can't comprehend, Tucker, what radically changes a man. I mean, if we break down the second part of basically an omnibus, let's break that down. So Mike Johnson is pro-life. In the second part of the omnibus, just less than 2 weeks ago, he funded full-term abortion clinics. Full-term abortion clinics. He funded the trans agenda on children. I mean, how does that even happen from a Christian conservative Republican speaker?
Extremely important points raised by MGT there. We hope Republicans take this very seriously. You can watch that interview in full on the Vigilant News Network article linked in the description below. Now, resolving to eat healthier this year was easy. Actually doing it, not so easy. Better nutrition is a key to health and longevity, and a healthy diet could even help you avoid health risks that run in your family. Field of Greens is our healthy superfruit and vegetable habit. It's the only fruit and vegetable product that literally promises better health. At your next checkup, your doctor will notice your improved health or your money back. Do your vitamins or green drinks promise better health? Nope. Each superfruit and vegetable in Field of Greens was doctor selected for a specific health benefit. Some support your heart, lungs, and kidneys. Others support metabolism for healthy energy and weight loss. If you resolve to get healthier in 2024, it starts with Field of Greens. We got you 15% off your first order and free rush shipping. Visit brickhousevnn.com and use promo code VNN. That's promo code VNN at brickhousevnn.com. brickhousevnn.com. Well, Tennessee certainly seems to be leading the way, banning chemtrails, banning vaccine lettuce. They are doing a fantastic job, and so vaccine lettuce is on track to be classified as a drug in Tennessee, but it's not only lettuce that this bill covers. Legislators in the state of Tennessee have passed a bill aiming to designate foods containing vaccine ingredients as a drug. HB 1894 was passed last Thursday in a 23-6 Senate vote. The bill defines a vaccine or vaccine material as a substance intended for use in humans to stimulate the production of antibodies and provide immunity against disease, prepared from the causative agent of a disease, its products, or a synthetic substitute treated to act as an antigen without inducing the disease that is authorized or approved by the United States Food and Drug Administration. During discussion of the bill last week, one Democrat Senator, Heidi Campbell, said she wouldn't be voting for the bill since she was unaware of instances where this type of food is sold to customers. I'll go a little bit further down the article because her comments are unbelievable. She says, while I feel like this legislation's basically anodyne, I mean, I guess it's addressing something that I can't imagine would ever exist, which is the idea that we would somehow be putting vaccines into foods that you would buy in a grocery store. I mean, I can't think of any logical reason why someone or anyone would ever do that. And I do know that, certainly there have been experiments with putting vaccines in vegetables for the purposes of studying possible transmission methods, but the idea that this would somehow correlate to some kind of retail offering of vegetables, especially when that vegetable would cost, many thousands of dollars, just seems to me, I guess, messy to be passing legislation for that reason. So I will be voting no. Well, Senator Heidi Campbell certainly could just do a quick Google search and see that the University of California has already, in September of 2021, conducted experiments about putting vaccines into lettuce. You've also got the University of Ottawa. Please pass the salad. Edible vaccines produced in lettuce to protect against COVID-19. UC Riverside. Grow and eat your own vaccines. I mean, the number of experiments and conversations that have been had around this really are endless. But I want to go to some further comments that were observed during the hearing. Here's Senator Frank Nicely.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, I've been reading about this for a couple of years now, and evidently with this new technology, they can raise this lettuce is what they're talking about first. They can raise this stuff so cheap, and I've been reading about it, talking about just putting it in lettuce and mass medicate everybody like they do with fluoride in the water. I mean, who controls the dose? If you eat a lot of lettuce, you're going to get a lot of mRNA. If you don't eat any, you won't get any. And they're actually talking about other vegetables that they're trying to put this in. And my question is, would this have to be sold in a drugstore? Would you still buy it in a grocery store? Why don't we just outlaw this stuff completely? We don't have any idea what it's going to do to our children, to us, or old people, anything. I mean, this stuff like out of a science fiction movie. I mean, it's ridiculous. It changes your DNA. mRNA changes your DNA. If you have your DNA tested now, and you eat a bunch of this lettuce, take a bunch of these mRNA vaccines, and you go back and get your DNA tested again, it's going to be a little different. It's not going to be the same as it was that you were born with, that you got from your parents. This is dangerous stuff. We need to study it and probably need to outlaw it. I mean, I can't imagine. When I first read about this, I thought, this cannot be true. But you keep reading about it, and it is true.
Maybe Senator Campbell could use a lesson or two in reading and research from Senator Nicely. It's incredibly refreshing to hear someone speaking common sense in these hearings, a very rare feat these days. We're very encouraged to hear those well-researched comments and concerns from Senator Nicely. The bill next heads to Governor Bill Lee's desk for his signature. Last week, Scotland's hate bill came into effect. The extremely draconian and nonsensical bill, in a nutshell, is similar to Canada's Bill C-63, or the Online Harms Act, in that it opens up the ability for people to anonymously report one another to authorities for hurt feelings. It makes it a crime to make comments about people based on their age, disability, religion, sexual orientation, transgender identity, or being intersex. And this is, of course, because saying that men don't belong in women's sports or that we shouldn't mutilate children's genitals could upset someone with blue hair. Interestingly, as part of the bill's passing, Scotland also ruled that blasphemy against Christianity was no longer an offence under common law. Strange that. It also opens up the possibility for you to be criminally charged for having a private conversation with your family within the privacy of your own home if someone catches wind of what was discussed and deems it hurtful to their feelings. As part of the immense amount of police resources that will be needed to address all of these hurt feelings now, Scotland Police have announced that they will stop investigating other crimes like break-ins where there is no surveillance footage available because the crime's just too hard to solve. Needless to say, this is beyond ridiculous, and yet another example of the extreme lengths governments are going to in order to outlaw telling the truth and make denying reality the norm. J.K. Rowling could be imprisoned for misgendering people under the new law, says a Scottish Parliament member who says that police could arrest her over an X thread she posted in protest of a recently passed hate speech law, the act that we were just talking about. Slamming the Scottish Hate Crime Act, Rowling began her lengthy post by sharing screenshots of biological men posing as women. She gives an example of a prominent trans activist who is a darling of prominent Scottish politicians, says Rowling, who is obviously displaying pictures of themselves with a knife and an axe, making threats. Direct action gets the goods and you can take the change by force. She also gives an example of another convicted double rapist, Isla Bryson, who found her true, authentic female self surely before she was due to be sentenced. Another fragile flower, Kate Delatowski, she says, was rightly sent to a women's prison in Scotland after conviction. This ensured she was protected from violent, predatory men, unlike the 10-year-old girl Katie sexually assaulted in a women's public bathroom. Rowling gives many, many other examples of predatory men who, upon sentencing, changed their gender and seemingly, for the reason of going to a women's prison. I suppose that's what she's suggesting here. After posting about a few alleged sex offenders, Rowling also added a transgender athlete to the list, writing, "But most women aren't axe toters or sex offenders, so let's talk about role models." And she talks about a male that's now playing in women's sports. Rowling went on to call out a pair of United Nations appointees who are biological men living as women. And news broadcaster India Willoughby was the last trans person Rowling called out in the thread, pointing out he still gets airtime despite a checkered and controversial past. And Rowling makes examples of some of the statements made by India. India then cried that Rowling had committed a, quote, hate crime. Concluding her message, Rowling wrote, "April Fools. Only kidding. Obviously, the people mentioned in the above tweets aren't women at all, but men, every last one of them." But Rowling isn't the only one who's joined the fight. Since the extremely dystopian legislation came into force last Monday, Scotland police have had thousands of complaints lodged, with the force reportedly dealing with 60 complaints on average per hour. Now here's the kicker. Most of them are about Humza Yousaf, the First Minister and brainchild behind the legislation, who's currently being complained about at a higher rate than Rowling. The complaints include a speech he made in 2020 about being the only non-white person in the room. When you play stupid games and pass stupid laws, this is what you get. Well played, Scotland. Keep it up. And on that note, with the people fighting back, another good bit of news this week. You would remember last week that we covered the story of billboard Chris being censored by Australia's e-safety commissioner in Canada. It was absolutely outrageous action, and now Elon Musk's X is taking legal action against Australia for demanding the removal of billboard Chris's tweet over misgendering. And you're all familiar with that story now, but the latest development is that X is withholding the post in Australia in compliance with the order, but intends to file a legal challenge to the order to protect its users' right to free speech. We will obviously keep you up to date as that story develops. Now, Sage Steele has exposed ESPN's ban on forbidden COVID vaccine questions. Huge story this week. Former ESPN broadcaster Sage Steele dropped a stunning revelation on the Tucker Carlson network on Thursday. Steele, who'd worked for ESPN for 17 years, revealed that asking uncomfortable questions about the COVID-19 injections was absolutely not allowed on the sports network, and they were never asked on the network. In 2021, Steele made headlines for her critical comments regarding ESPN's and the Walt Disney Company's COVID-19 vaccine mandates for employees. In a podcast appearance on Uncut with Jay Cutler, Steele expressed her disagreement with the mandates, stating her belief that such policies infringe on personal freedoms. She said, "I respect everyone's decision, I really do, but to mandate it is sick and it's scary to me in many ways. Despite her criticism of the mandate, Steele disclosed that she had decided to get vaccinated, citing her desire to continue doing her job and support her family as the primary reason for her compliance. She remarked, "I didn't want to do it, but I work for a company that mandates it, and I had until September 30th to get it done or I'm out." Well, Steele revealed to Carlson that she had to lie about things, I should say, that she didn't agree with while working for ESPN, and was forbidden to ask questions that undermined the safety and efficacy of the so-called COVID-19 vaccines. Among the off-limits topics was the question of whether COVID-19 vaccines could be linked to the alarming number of instances of athletes collapsing. Those questions were absolutely not allowed, and they were never asked on the network, she says. Let's take a listen.
Forget about this stuff. I'm just saying about being true to who we are
100%.
and standing up for what we believe in.
And not lying. No, I totally
did have to
agree.
lie. I had to lie a lot.
Yeah.
About things that I didn't agree with that we were doing on the air.
Like, tell me.
Well, to not be able to ask specific questions about, when we had athletes all of a sudden collapse, LeBron's son.
Yep.
It's a fair question to ask if he had the vaccine.
Yes, he's a young man.
Mm-hmm. Healthiest possible.
Exactly.
That's one example. But to not be able to go there and ask those questions.
They wouldn't let you ask.
Oh, no. And it wasn't just me. It was other pieces that were done on Outside the Lines about it. But to me, I don't care if you're LeBron's son or if you're my neighbor. Like, you're a young man in particular, because there's some science behind that. I know we don't like the science word now, but there's some science behind that, right? And so if an 18-year-old kid is suddenly collapsing.
Especially a boy. That's right.
Yeah, if I'm his mother, I'm asking, okay, did he collapse because it was raining today versus sunny? Like, any potential reason for this sudden collapse.
All the variables.
You're going to ask as a journalist. I'm not saying it was the vax because I don't know. I'm not a doctor.
Course, I get it.
But we must ask this question. But those questions were absolutely not allowed. And they were never asked on the network.
Why would I mean, I believe you, and I've certainly seen a lot of that working in the media. But you got to wonder about the motive. I mean, why would ESPN want to run cover for Pfizer? Like, why do they care? But they do care so much.
I don't know. Pfizer, Moderna, J&J,
Yeah.
CDC, Fauci. Like, it goes deep, right?
It goes very deep. It's just
Disney, though. I mean, I think we have to remember who runs ESPN.
As we close in on the election, you see more and more shocking events happening around the world and even at home. I don't believe it's all a coincidence, and neither should you. Plus, our society faces additional challenges: high inflation, mounting debt, rising interest rates, and labour disputes. These factors further strain our economy, with escalating global tensions threatening to disrupt vital supply chains. There's a reason why so many patriots preserve their wealth with gold, because it stands on its own as a beacon of stability. And over the last 5 years, it's almost doubled in value. Allegiance Gold has done things the right way from the beginning, so it's no coincidence that they've earned the highest trust ratings in the precious metals industry, 5 stars with TrustLink and an A+ with the Better Business Bureau. Allegiance Gold can help protect your IRA or 401k with physical gold and silver, or you can have it delivered securely to your doorstep. Get up to $5,000 in free silver on a qualifying investment when you go to protectwithvnn.com or call 855-324-GOLD. Don't risk your financial future betting against these forces. Act today. Protectwithvnn.com. That's protectwithvnn.com or call 855-324-GOLD. Some more good news this week. Louisiana has become the first US state to reject the WHO-WEF power grab. The Louisiana State Senate has passed a Senate bill with a unanimous vote. This bill is a bold declaration of state sovereignty, setting the stage for a legal barricade against the overreach of globalist organizations, the United Nations, UN, the World Health Organization, WHO, and the World Economic Forum, WEF. Senate Bill 133, co-authored by Republican State Senators Valerie Hodges and Thomas A. Presley, as well as State Rep. Kathy Edmondson, aims to ensure that these international bodies have no jurisdiction or authority within the state's boundaries. The bill states, the WHO, UN, and the WEF shall have no jurisdiction or power within the state of Louisiana. No rule, regulation, fee, tax, policy, or mandate of any kind of the World Health Organization, UN, and the WEF shall be enforced or implemented by the state of Louisiana or any agency, department, board, commission, political subdivision, governmental entity of the state, parish, municipality, or any other political entity. The proposed legislation is a response to what some state legislators view as overreach by these organizations into American sovereignty and personal freedoms. Senator Hodges, representing District 13, spoke to Blaze News about the bill, stating, "We have watched a horror story unfold in front of us, as time has shown that the recommendations and coercive regulations from outside organizations such as the WHO have harmed hundreds of thousands of Americans." The senator cited concerns about vaccine safety and the influence of international organizations on domestic policy as key drivers for the legislation. The bill, which still needs to pass in the Republican-controlled Louisiana House, has been crafted to block the implementation or enforcement of any rules, regulations, taxes, policies, or mandates from the UN, WHO, and WEF. The Gateway pundit previously reported that the WHO proposed a global pandemic treaty, which includes a provision for mandatory universal digital passport and ID system. We've also spoken in length about this on this broadcast. It's not just the treaty as well that we need to be concerned about. It's the international health regulations, which were initiated by Biden, the amendments to those regulations, in which the WHO initially proposed that they would erase human rights, dignity, and fundamental freedoms from any of their future pandemic response considerations. Now, that is extremely alarming language, and of course, no one should want any association with this organization following those statements, even though they were later retracted. But the initial intent was to never consider human rights, dignity, and fundamental freedoms again. So Louisiana is doing a fantastic job here. The US government is leading all nations into a global beast system that would require compliance with digital health tyranny enforced by the UN's WHO. As reported by Leo Hohmann, the Biden regime was pushing the amendments. This is what I just mentioned before. Even a public health emergency of regional concern would have triggered the WHO's authority to step in and enforce rules on things like mask wearing, social distancing, lockdowns, even vaccines, of which Big Pharma always has a new one at the ready, could be mandated by the UN agency headed by the corrupt Ethiopian communist Dr. Tedros. As Joe Hoft writes for the Gateway Pundit, the amended agreement would prevent Americans from doing anything that the UN world government apparatus didn't want to be done, and would in essence take away all rights of Americans in an emergency like COVID. It's also worth noting there that the UN has their political declaration as well, which even though 11 countries voted against, last year in September, the UN said, we're going to pass it anyway. And it essentially gives all authority to Antonio Guterres to become the dictator of the world in the event of a black swan event, an event in outer space, a climate emergency, pandemics, all sorts of things. So the fact that Louisiana has included a provision to have nothing to do with the United Nations is very important, because it does extend past what the WHO is doing with the IHR and the treaty. And they're calling it an accord instead of a treaty in an effort to bypass US Senate approval. This is the same in every country. Former Minnesota U.S. Representative and current head of the School of Government at Regent University, Michelle Bachmann, is concerned about the globalists whose arrogance leads them to deny God-given individual rights. In an interview with Joe Hoft last year, Bachmann said, "People sense that there is something seriously, drastically wrong, and that something is that you and I and people across the world are losing their freedom and their authority to make decisions. What we are seeing is that our choices are being taken away from us. As a matter of fact, we are being punished for choices. We are being censored for choices. We may not have the freedoms in the very near future that we enjoyed even 5 years ago and 10 years ago. We're seeing that not only in the US, but globally. Today, there is a threat of global domination. It seems to come from global institutions, but also from people who have more wealth than people who have ever seen before in the history of man. They're planning another pandemic right around the corner. Of course, the pandemic is just a pretext for control, and this is why we are incredibly encouraged by the state of Louisiana, and we hope that other states in the United States and countries worldwide follow suit. It is very easy to exit the World Health Organization and the United Nations. If your countries are telling you that it isn't, they're lying to you. Well, some more good news this week. 100% cancer remission achieved in all patients in a groundbreaking study. A recent study published in the New England Journal of Medicine has yielded groundbreaking results after a monoclonal antibody successfully eradicated rectal cancer in all enrolled patients, ushering them into complete remission without resorting to chemotherapy, radiation, or surgical interventions. Let's hear what the Epoch Times has to say.
As a result of the administered monoclonal antibodies, the doctors were not able to see any evidence of any tumors among 100% of the trial participants, which, according to Dr. Andrea Sursik, who was one of the lead researchers in this particular trial, is something that they have never seen before. Here's specifically what she said during an interview over on CNN. Quote, "It's absolutely incredible. We didn't expect it. We've certainly never seen this before. It's really what, cancer doctors' dreams are made of, to see a response like this, such incredible efficacy with really almost no toxicity. The patients are feeling great after the treatment with completely normal body function in something like rectal cancer, where normally our therapies are really quite toxic. So it's absolutely incredible." Then, in terms of how these monoclonal antibodies actually work within the patient's own body, she explained that essentially they unlock the body's ability to heal itself.
Well, that is indeed encouraging and promising, and we encourage everyone to read the article in full, linked in the description below. That's all that we have time for this week. Thank you all for joining us and for your continued support of this show. Please make sure to like, give us your thoughts in the comments, and share this broadcast widely. Also, please bookmark the post. The weaponization of community notes greatly affects the reach of your favorite accounts on X, so you can help them and us by bookmarking posts, which increases their visibility and reach. We can reach more people with the truth this way. Follow Vigilant News and Vigilant Fox on X. Visit the Vigilant News Network website for regular updates, and find me on X also at Z_media. That's Z_media. We'll be back next Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern with the truth the mainstream media desperately does not want you to know, but we'll always tell it to you. Until then, stay informed, stay vigilant. Good night.